The International Association of Youth and Students for Peace, or in short YSP, is an organization connecting teenagers and young adults throughout the world and empowering us with a new vision for the future. We are not powerless about the flow of history, just like we are not powerless about our own lives. With responsibility and integrity, we can make our own lives bright and fulfilling. With service and empathy, we can together shape the future of our communities, our nations, and even the whole world. How shall we make that future look like? One where we fight each other to each secure our own benefit? Or one where we truly care for one another and give as much as we take? It's up to you, and it's up to me.
Our goal is not only to phantom about a brighter future, but to truly take the initiative as young people to make it a reality. What kind of initiatives? Well, we follow the idea of the 17 sustainable goals set by the UN in 2015. So along these sustainable goals, we organize peace designer tables, service projects, interfaith gatherings, and we seek for partnership with different kinds of NGOs. And our main goal is to one day work with the UN. So we are not only active in Germany, France, Hungary, Czech, but in many different European countries and in the world. So we strive to work beyond culture barriers, to follow common values, to be in unity as one youth.
Oh, good to see you. Actually, there is one more thing to go. Since you know who we are and what we do, there is also a question: what are we doing here on YouTube channel? So we wanna produce a good quality materials for you, as well creating a group of people willing to change something and improve in themselves. This is a great possibility, and this is YSP YouTube channel on which we wanna invite you. Stay tuned, subscribe, and see you soon.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.
Subscribe, thanks.
See you very soon.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to this virtual forum, the UN Dream, Intergenerational Cooperation, and Our Journey to Peace. My name is Katarina Connery, and I am Vice President for Women's Federation for World Peace USA. I am honored to be your moderator today. I am pleased to welcome all of you joining in from around the world to this intergenerational discussion. If you would like to take a moment and post in the chat, where are you joining in from? We'd love to hear from you. So with this event, we commemorate the 76th anniversary of the UN's founding. Today's program was organized by the Women's Federation for World Peace International and the International Association of Youth and Students for Peace, and is co-sponsored by the Permanent Mission of the Republic of the Philippines to the United Nations in New York. So while the UN continues to pursue its founding purpose and founding vision to end the scourge of war and establish peace, there is a risk of losing the progress that has been made without intergenerational cooperation. So this forum today is designed to be a space where inspiration and wisdom can be exchanged between generations. Keynote addresses from leaders of both the elder and younger generations will be discussing the role and the legacy of the UN, highlighting the significance and the importance of intergenerational cooperation. This will be followed by a dialogue where these leaders will explore the tensions that exist as the dream and the founding principles of the UN are bequeathed to a new generation. There are challenges involved, but despite those challenges, there is also tremendous potential. I hope you agree with me. We can unlock that potential by collaborating across our generations. So there's so much to learn from each other in our journey towards realizing a world of sustainable peace. So let's get started. To start us off, in our program today, His Excellency Enrique A. Manalo, permanent representative of the Republic of the Philippines to the United Nations in New York, will be giving the opening remarks. Ambassador Manalo served as acting Secretary of Foreign Affairs and Undersecretary for Policy of the Department of Foreign Affairs. He was the Philippine ambassador to the United Kingdom, Ireland, Belgium, and Luxembourg. Ambassador Manalo also served as head of the Philippine mission to the EU, as well as ambassador and permanent representative to the UN office in Geneva. So let us give a warm welcome to His Excellency, Ambassador Manalo.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I thank the Women's Federation for World Peace International and the International Federation of Youth and Students for Peace for organizing this important event, which the Philippine Mission is pleased to co-sponsor. The COVID-19 pandemic has exposed inequalities in our society and threatens the gains that we have achieved in building lasting peace and sustainable development. Existing situations of vulnerability, such as poverty, discrimination, marginalization, and lack of access to education, which were magnified by conflict, have been further exacerbated by the pandemic. Children and young people stand at risk of being left behind. Policies for COVID-19 recovery should take into account the needs of conflict-affected regions. It is worthy to note that President Duterte, early on in the pandemic, declared a unilateral ceasefire with the Communist Party of the Philippines as a demonstration of the government's commitment to the swift and unimpeded provision of public health access and the safe movement of health workers. In the context of COVID-19, it is important to consider the causes of armed conflict as well as their impact on vulnerable populations, particularly children and young people. It is also important to build capacity on conflict resolution and to strengthen peace-oriented values, especially among the youth. The Philippines believes that the youth are the leaders of tomorrow, as well as of today. They are agents of change and critical to inclusive nation building. Having one of the youngest populations in the Asia-Pacific region, the Philippines recognizes the urgency to leverage the demographic dividend, not only for economic development, but also for peace and security. The National Youth Commission established and implements the Philippine Youth Development Plan 2017 to 2022, which includes peace building and security among the 9 areas of youth participation. The government pursues a strategy of optimizing youth participation in the peace process. It also promotes the pro-social participation of youth in conflict with the law and delinquent youth to foster rehabilitation and reintegration. The Philippines fully supports the relevant Security Council resolutions which aim to actively engage young people to participate meaningfully in peace processes and conflict resolution. Young people have unique skills and perspectives that can inform and benefit peace negotiations. The government's commitment to include the youth in peace-building processes was demonstrated through the crafting of the National Action Plan for Youth, Peace, and Security and the establishment of youth peace tables. Consultations with the youth, including opportunities for dialogue with different actors and stakeholders in the peace process, created space for young people to express the concerns and issues that are specific to their demographic. The youth played important roles in the peace process between the Philippine government and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. Young women brought a gender lens to the peace agreement through their engagement with informal women's rights networks and their successful efforts to include stronger provisions against domestic violence in the peace agreement. The Philippines believes that intergenerational trust and cooperation is needed to optimize our efforts towards bringing sustainable peace, security, and development to our country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Thank you for that hopeful message, and welcome to everyone who's joining in now. It is noteworthy in Ambassador Manalo's introduction and welcoming greetings, how he emphasized youth and how young people bring unique skills and perspectives to the table, which are effective components to peacemaking. So thank you again to Ambassador Manalo. Next, we want to introduce our keynote speaker, our first keynote speaker representing the elder generation, Dr. Rima Saleh. Dr. Saleh serves as chairperson of the Early Childhood Peace Consortium, which was founded in the belief that children and families can be agents of change for peace. She is former Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, former Deputy Executive Director of UNICEF, former Deputy Special Representative of the Secretary General to the UN mission in Central African Republic and Chad, as well as she served on the United Nations High-Level Independent Panel on Peace Operations. She is currently at the Yale Child Study Center. So we're so glad to have Dr. Saleh here with us, and let us welcome her up.
Thank you. Thank you, Katarina. Excellencies, distinguished participants, friends and colleagues. It gives me great pleasure to be with you today. I want to thank Ms. Merle Barlan, the International Vice President and Deputy Director, Office for UN Relations, Women's Federation for World Peace, for honoring me with her invitation to participate and celebrate with you the 76th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations. This day and the values it stands for will always be special for me. It is an organization that I served proudly for more than 30 years in many regions of the world, where I witnessed how its mission was a beacon of hope and peace for millions around the world. Today, I want to pay tribute and homage to the hundreds of thousands of women and men whose tireless dedication and sacrifice during those 76 years made a difference and helped to advance the ideals of the United Nations family and to fulfill the goals of its charter, promoting understanding between peoples and nations. I have the privilege to talk to you today about the UN Dream, intergenerational cooperation, and our journey to peace, the elder perspective. 76 years ago, on the 25th of June, 1945, the world leaders met in San Francisco and signed the Charter of the United Nations. It says, "We, the peoples of the United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime had brought untold sorrow to mankind, and to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, in the equal rights of men and women, nations large and small." It further says, "To practice tolerance and live together in peace with another as good neighbors, and to unite our strength to maintain international peace and justice." Allow me to start with my personal story, as my career and vision to participate in building an inclusive world of peace and justice were shaped by my personal narrative. I was born a refugee, and I often asked my parents why we are refugees. As a child, it was difficult to comprehend that we were different and what could we do to be part of normal life again. I also realized from a very young age that my family and people were deprived of their human rights and social justice. I believe growing up in this context nurtured my passion to help people in need fulfill their human rights and give them social justice. At first, I wanted to become an international lawyer, in order to defend the vulnerable and serve as their voice. But I ended up graduating with a degree in development anthropology. And after conducting research for my doctoral thesis in refugee camps, there I witnessed the terrible effects that war has on people's lives, particularly on women and children. And I learned that more indicators are needed to capture the full extent of people's pain, loss, and sadness. The people I met and lived with had tremendous strength. Their remarkable strength bore upon hope for a better future for their children, including access to quality education and peace that would allow them to return to their villages and towns. They were also grateful to the care and assistance they received from the United Nations. Upon graduation from the university, I met a childhood friend in New York. She was working at the UN. I shared with her my aspirations and passion to help people realize their rights. She told me to go to UNICEF. It is down the road. Indeed, I went down the road, and it was a long and satisfying road. I felt that working with UNICEF and the United Nations was a fulfillment of a dream. The United Nations Charter and the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the CRC, provided an ideal concrete platform for the pursuit of peace, justice, social progress, and human rights. The human dimension of development have been central also in the mandate of the United Nations and its family of agencies since the beginning. These agencies have been engaged in a vast array of work that seeks to improve people's lives around the world. And my service to UNICEF and the Department of Peacekeeping Operations took me to many parts of the world, including in Africa, Asia, the Middle East, to countries that were marked by poverty, violent conflict, and crippled by instability. So I joined UNICEF in 1987, in the era when the child rights were steadily gaining ground. The Convention on the Rights of the Child was ratified by the UN General Assembly in 1989. It was the most comprehensive statement of children's rights ever produced. It is comprehensive and universal, and it applies to all children. All governments must take action to protect all children's rights. It was a new era, an era of new ethics for the protection and care of children. It was an era that reaffirmed that the advancement of societies is inevitably linked to the well-being of children. In the countries I serve, the UNICEF teams and partners work together to surmount all difficulties and barriers that hinder the realization of the rights of children. We mobilized governments, parliaments, and civil society. We called for the increase in budget for basic services in health, education, and protection. Much of the progress realized for the children in some countries seemed very challenging, especially for those countries in situation of war, violent conflict, involving families and children in situations of displacement. There I met children who had been traumatized, displaced, and orphaned, who had never seen a school in their lives. Instead of spending their days in the simple joy of childhood, they were trapped in being combatants. UNICEF and its partners exerted all efforts to build a protective environment for those children by demobilizing child soldiers, by organizing child-friendly spaces, and by leading in back-to-school campaigns in many countries. I wish you were with me to see the eyes of boys and girls going back to school. They were full of joy and hope. Distinguished participants, what was also important is that struggle for justice and accountability for wartime atrocities committed against children that started to receive international attention by the adoption of resolution in 1612 and the recognition that violence against children, and later Resolution 1325, that violence against women are a threat to peace and security in the world. We can also say that since the early 90s, the number and intensity of armed conflicts had declined. This was in large measure achieved through the peaceful settlement of conflict at the local and national level. The United Nations also played a critical role in supporting this positive trend through its peace operations, as well as through the work of its wider political, human rights, and development pillars. Unfortunately, despite this overall spread of peace, there have been a reversal of the positive trends in the last decade, and conflicts have been in the rise again. It is in this context of achievement, fragility, and challenges that the United Nations continues its journey to further advance the values of its charter. In a context where still millions of families are trapped in situations of war, conflicts, and violence that disrupt the fabric of their societies and compromise the very foundation of their institutions, including the family. In a context where more than 82 million people have been forced to flee their homes. But we can say with confidence that in the last 7 years, the international community witnessed a number of triumphs, among them the adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the Sustaining Peace Resolution, and particularly the Resolution on Youth, Peace and Security, complementing 1325, and the launch of the Plan of Action to prevent violent extremism. All these efforts heralded a new era, a new vision for building peaceful and inclusive societies as called by 2030 Agenda, and where people are at the center of peace and sustainable development efforts. This is an era of partnership with all members of society, including women and youth, in the service of peace. The resolution on youth, peace, and security reinforces the transformative power of more than 1.8 billion young people. It further urges the international community and government to support the youth efforts and integrate them in decision-making at all levels, carrying out intergenerational dialogue and youth-adult confidence building in training activities. So now, it is the time to elevate the role of youth on the global peace agenda. It is the time to demonstrate by action the transformative power of intergenerational cooperation in building a world of peace, of justice, and a world of development. You know, dear young people, it is the strength of our partnership, adults and youth, that will shape the pace and the direction of progress we make so that the United Nations deliver on the goals and values of its charter, so that the United Nations be credible to all people and fit for purpose for all the people on this globe. It is our shared responsibility for the generations to come, and every one of us is responsible. And the time is now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Salah. That was beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your many years of experience and wisdom at the UN and beyond. I think I speak for the other young people in the audience that you are an inspiration to us. Many of us who share that same passion you were speaking of, that we want to do something to help the people in the world. So yes, it is time to elevate the role of youth, and it's time for us to learn from you, Dr. Salah, and many others who have led the way. So thank you so much. Please write in the chat your thanks to Dr. Sala and any inspirations you got. So moving on. Next, I'd like to introduce a powerhouse keynote speaker representing the younger generation, Ms. Tarina Ahuja. Tarina is a student at Harvard College and cares deeply about social justice and civil rights issues. The Greater Good Initiative, which she is co-founder and president of, is a youth-led, youth-run national policy think tank. It is working to write and advocate for policy at the local, state, and federal levels in the sectors of the economy, public health, education, civil rights, and the environment. Tarina is driven to be a person of change, focusing on implementing solutions for our society centered on empathy. So please give a warm welcome to Tarina.
Thank you so much for having me. It is such an honor to be here, especially alongside trailblazers like Dr. Salah, who I learned so much from. I've always looked up to you and admired the work that you've done. So being here is such a beautiful opportunity to be in this space together. Radical imagination is the philosophy that we can build the future we imagine, no matter how outlandish, impractical, and idealistic it may sound. For me, radical imagination is made up of a lot of things. A world free from vast injustice and cruel abuse. A world free from colonial and imperial legacies. A world free from human suffering and fracturing violence. A world where liberation is centered as our critical and moral imperative. A world navigated by our collective goodness in building social progress. Ultimately, a world where empathy, institutional empathy, interpersonal empathy, and emotional empathy is ingrained in every nook of action and policy and how we interact with one another. This is my UN dream, a dream that requires work and a dream that is rooted in pure hope, a dream that we have already started working towards, and I am sure is attainable. My name is Tarina Ahuja. I'm a sophomore at Harvard College studying political empathy and doing a secondary in ethnicity, migration, and rights. I lead a youth-led, youth-run policy think tank called the Greater Good Initiative, working to write and advocate for policies at the local, state, and federal levels, all written by young people. I also serve as the executive director of an organization that empowers young women to serve, advocate, and amplify their own communities. Before any of that, though, the core of who I am is my identity as an empath, looking for ways we can channel true understanding into impactful and meaningful action. I am the product of the legacy of refuge charted out by the powerful women that came before me. My great-grandmother escaped the India-Pakistan partition, landing in Iran. My grandmother fled the Iran-Iraq war to come to the US, and my mother, getting to the US as a teenager after growing up in a revolutionary Iran, paid her own way through college and medical school while supporting her family. It was these women who ingrained in me the vitality of resisting oppression and chasing dreams as unlikely as the world might tell us they are. A couple of years ago, I found myself teaching a class of fifth graders about civic action. On a sunny Tuesday afternoon, amidst a chorus of juice boxes slurping after snack time, I posed the question to them all. If you were to snap your fingers and have something in the world change right now, what would it be? As elementary as it sounds, I ask you to take a moment to think about that question and really reflect. What would be your snap of the fingers? What would ensue? After I asked the class for answers, one little boy had his hand shot straight up. He was gleaming with pride, and after I called on him, he responded, "I would make sure everyone gets the justice they deserve." This statement might be innocent and simple, but it's also radically transformative. It was this comment that reawakened my own reservoirs of hope and action, as this 5-year-old, 10 years apart from me, and I shared a common dream, a dream that I think many of us here watching today share. Every time that I think of this sweet anecdote, I am reminded of our shared goodness, our shared idealism, and the ultimate maxim that our humanity reigns supreme, as much as it may not feel like it in a polarized world. A lot of the work I do has me thinking about the capacity for power among young people across the globe. Our generation is being met with unprecedented challenges: a climate crisis, unseen genocides, newly transformed pandemics, and so much more. We have also met these crises with unprecedented action, mobilizing across the globe to show our leaders that we will not remain complacent or silent in the face of violence and cruelty. At the same time, we are also living in a vastly different world from the one that existed when the UN was founded in 1945. With the Sustainable Development Goals serving as a guiding light for our urgent and necessary priorities, allowing us to focus on imminent and pervasive issues like sustainable cities, clean water, gender parity, reduced inequalities, and more. The UN operates in every corner of the world, looking to address and provide long-term infrastructure to some of these phenomena that inflict the highest degrees of pain. Still, part of the UN dream lies in the work yet to be done. As the fifth grader said, it lies in the work of building real and empathetic justice across intergenerational borders and cultural bonds. A large area of focus and care for young people today is looking at the rejuvenation of justice through the lens of the concept of power. Who has it? How can it be shared? How can destructive power be dismantled? How can past dynamics of institutional power play into who still takes grasp of power? And how can we use power for peace? In moving our dream forward is not only vital but necessary to look at the ways people have been relegated to lives of marginalization as a direct result of action from those who held power. Through cooperation between our generations, we must jointly commit to supporting major and intentional decolonization efforts while thinking about how to return the power that has been stolen from so many communities. It also means working internally to ensure that all countries, not simply those in the West, have equal power and stances from which to negotiate as we pull apart what imperialism still exists within the walls of our establishments. This also means uplifting those organizers seeking liberation and peace in their homes and communities by providing them all of the backings the UN could offer. This is my UN dream. Throughout its history, the UN has served as a staple for bringing unlikely partners together with a higher goal in mind. As we celebrate this anniversary, we celebrate the ways we have challenged division and prioritized really seeing each other as human beings, regardless of age or culture, with the common desires for safety, love, happiness, and protection. From international efforts combating sexual assault, supporting disarmament, alleviating poverty, bolstering literacy and education, promoting self-determination, and so much more, the UN has served as a guiding light. Immediately brought to mind is the incredible work of trailblazing individuals like Dr. Salah, who is one of the strongest global advocates for women and children in conflict. All of the work we're doing is a work in progress. Responsibilities that will pass through my generation and into the ones after me. To keep this light of action alive, it is ever more necessary for us to pass wisdom and knowledge between those experienced and those new to the forum, but oh so energized. This light is one that needs to be continuously wielded, handled with care, and brought to the forefront as each generation rekindles the light with a new energy and new passion. Oftentimes, we tend to think of the ways we might be bridged apart, but the reality of the matter is when we extend hands and have intentional empathy towards each other, our capacity to create supernovas of change is boundless. To those here, I would ask you one thing. Don't undermine the potency and strength of young people. We not only have the vision, but the skills and abilities to keep mobilizing, organizing, writing policy, and creating transformation. It is a common occurrence for many of us to come to folks with power with our ideas and dreams and hopes, and to be met with a simple and dismissive pat on the back. Instead, when we are taken seriously for everything that we bring, When we are able to work together and not in silos, our progress will be exponential. To that end, I want to share with you something that is always sitting on my heart and soul. I am a Sikh, which is a minority monotheistic religion originating from Punjab. We have this value called Chardi Kala, which translates into eternal optimism. This is something that I use as a constant push in my everyday life. Amidst the adversity and pain that exists in the world, if we hold on to each other, caring for each other with sincerity, joining hands in our collective liberation, working to reckon with the violence we may have inflicted through historical contexts, we will find ways to move forward and build better. The UN dream takes each and every one of us actively seeking each other out, actively seeing each other for all we bring. I see you. To everyone joining us here today, I am sending you immense love, light, courage, and Chardi Kala. The UN dream will not simply stay in the stars and galaxies above us. It will arrive here in our shared realities, a dream manifested into something that was once only stored in our most radical of imaginations. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much, Tarina. That was such a vibrant and hopeful and eternally optimistic message. I love it. I feel like you showed us today, demonstrated for us, there is so much to learn from our younger generation, our up and coming future leaders. I know your future will be bright and you'll be making a lot of amazing positive changes. So please share in the chat your gratitude, your inspiration with Tarina, and thank you so much again. And thank you to both of our amazing keynote speakers. We're so grateful to have them here, but they're not going anywhere. It's time now for the panel discussion. This discussion will be centered on our theme, the UN Dream, Intergenerational Cooperation, and our journey to peace. The panel will include both of our keynote speakers, Dr. Sala and Tarina. We will also bring up for our panel discussion representatives from our co-sponsoring organizations. So we'll welcome up Mr. Milhan Stevens, who is president for Youth and Students for Peace, USA. Mr. Stevens is a visionary who has dedicated his life to making a world of peace. As president of Youth and Students for Peace, USA, he has empowered young people to take responsibility for the greatest challenge our world is facing today. I will also be joining our panel discussion representing Women's Federation. And just to tell you a little bit more about myself, I am currently pursuing my doctorate of ministry from the Unification Theological Seminary. And I was appointed to my role as Vice President for Women's Federation USA by our co-founder, Dr. Hak Jahan Moon, in 2014. I'm especially inspired to work with Women's Federation because of its vision for world peace through promoting leadership of the heart and strengthening families. So let's also welcome up our two keynote speakers to join our panel discussion. We do have some guiding questions to go through, and later on we'll be welcoming questions from the audience. So if you have a question, please post it in the chat or in the Q&A box. And for our panelists, if we can make sure we keep our remarks to brief so that we can get through as many questions as we can. So let's get started for this panel discussion. So our first question we're going to talk about, actually I wanted to address first to Dr. Sala due to your experience at the UN. When you think back to the founding principles of the UN, do you believe that the UN is on track to fulfilling that UN dream? Dr. Sala, do you want to start off the discussion?
Thank you, Katerina, for the question. I think it's on the right track to achieve the goals and particularly the values of the United Nations and of the Charter. However, there are many barriers. And the barriers, as I first said, is the rise of violent conflict and more complex. The violent conflicts now are more complex even to resolve. And they are really causing damages, and their impact on civil societies, on societies, is really very bad. It affects women, as we know, and it affects children, and and also millions of them, millions still of families and children are trapped in these situations. We know that 1 in 5 children in 2018 were born in conflict. 1 in 5 children were born in conflict. What is the future of those children? So also, since the beginning, of the 90s, as I said, we had a decline, but the problems is poverty also. According to the World Bank and the United Nations report, Pathways for Peace, Inclusive Approaches to Violent Conflict, they say that people living in half of the people living in poverty will be affected by high levels of violence by 2030. So we have conflict and poverty together.
Yeah.
Most importantly, another thing is what is happening now. The reinforcement and exclusions and inequalities in societies, how to deal with this. So this is very important, and that is why it is very important, and I repeat again, to work together on this.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Sala. Milhan or Tarina, do you have anything to add for this question? Go ahead, Milhan.
Yeah, thank you, Katerina, and thank you, Dr. Sala and Tarina. I mean, I'm still unpacking these keynotes. I mean, there is just so much wealth that we should review again and again. So many lessons learned. I think there's so much more to learn from you, Dr. Sala, and your experience. And one of my biggest fears is actually losing these stories, that if they don't get passed on to the next generation, it's scary to think what could happen. And Tarina just reminding us that there's not just 2 generations, there's generations within generations. There's always ways to be open to what a young mind can come up with. And if we know how to harvest that well. So thank you for your stories there. I'm a bit of an optimist myself. I think I gotta start by saying the UN has done exactly what it was intended to do, and was to prevent any world wars. Of course, we had, there's still a lot of armed conflicts going on, and a lot of displaced, families as a result of that. But I want to start with just acknowledging what the UN has done, and what it will continue to do, and that is to find bigger problems that require us to come together, and not just between generations, but between nations and civilizations. And so is it on track? I'd say in many ways, the UN has already fulfilled what it was meant to do. And now we have the opportunity to find new problems that we can unite on. And so that's my general response to that question.
All right, thank you so much. Tarina, do you have anything to add on whether we're on track for the UN dream?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, very much echoing both of the points before me, there's been such incredible and beautiful progress that's been made. Something that I think about as a threat to being on track is the division that we see. And I don't even mean just division between generations. I mean division in a much larger sense, in the way that we see conflicts, in the way that we see rhetoric around conflict, in the way that we are so quick to dismiss the humanity of somebody else, the way that we are so quick to dismiss statistics of millions of people suffering and kind of sweep it to the side. And I think that's a result of this sensationalism, a result of becoming numb after seeing so much human suffering that is happening as we speak, that is happening every single day. But there's so much of this idea that we've become used to human suffering as an inevitable. And that's something that I think that we cannot remain complacent with. We cannot ever come to see human suffering as somebody, being at the hands of violence and cruelty that can never be something that we see as okay. And so I think that's something that young people think about a lot, is thinking about how do we reckon with our history in order to create a more beautiful future. So it's no secret that our world and so much of our global dynamics is characterized by different power dynamics in the ways that colonization and imperialism have played into the ways and the levels that we see in our international community. So I think that a lot of what keeps us on track from the progress that we've already made is thinking about those histories and thinking about the ways that, the different identities, nationalities, ethnicities, cultures that we hold play into those power dynamics, and trying to figure out how do we come to a place where we can be on the same level, working together, acknowledging each other's goodness, each other's capacities, and ultimately thinking about this greater question as to how do we make sure that cruelty and suffering and violence and abuses of human rights is never something that we can sit in the face of and ever allow.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I was thinking as you were answering, especially where Milhan was saying that maybe we need like a little bit of a shift in our perspective. Maybe it's time for that. I mean, a lot has happened around the world these past few years. Maybe it's really time to really think about what do we mean by peace? And I feel that peace is more than just the absence of conflict. That's part of it, but it's also like what Tarina was saying. It's where empathy is ingrained in everything that we do, that there's always that care for the other and thinking about each other beyond our differences or what happened in the past. And there can be real healing as well and reconciliation. And also, I feel that maybe we need a change in our perspective with a lot of the international UN conversations has been about rights, right? The Universal Declaration of Rights and people's rights. I would like to also add, there's rights and responsibilities, right? Like what Dr. Sala was saying at the end of her address, we have a shared responsibility. So yes, we all have rights to various things, but we also have a responsibility to each other, to ourselves, to the planet, to the past, the present, and the future. So I'm so hopeful that we have all of you, people like you here who are, making a difference in the world. So to move on to the next question, what do you admire about young leaders today? And what do you admire about the more seasoned leaders?
About
anyone? Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe about the young people. I admire their compassion, their empathy. I admire their energy. I was just in a campus like 2 weeks ago in Utah, and I met young people who asked me, "How can we help? How can we help?" This readiness to help. How can we be of service to the United Nations? How can we help to achieve the goals of the United Nations? So this energy, this compassion, and also, most importantly, with this energy, they can ignite and let, this fire in the elder people be on all the time. Without your energy, this passion that I have, this passion I have had since maybe 30 or 40 years, will not stay without your energy.
All right. Thank you.
And also their eagerness to learn. Maybe when I was their age, I don't know if I was eager to learn about the world. Their eagerness to work and to serve is very important.
Dr. Salah, I know that you also teach at the Yale School of Medicine. I know I'm at Harvard and there's a little bit of a rival, but I hope you come visit us someday too, because I would love to meet you.
Yes, thank you.
But I think that's something that I greatly admire about the generations of leaders that come before us, especially incredible trailblazing women like you, Dr. Salah, is just this idea of course, wisdom. That's something that we hear often, the idea of experience and thinking about how to translate that experience into action. But I also think that in a similar vein, it's this idea of empathy and thinking about the kindness and compassion you showed towards us in taking us along and being so willing to teach us what you know, being so willing to an extend and hand out and saying, you know, you might be younger than me. You might have a very different level of experience than me, but come with me on this journey. Let me take you and show you and amplify you. And I think that's something that I thought about a lot is, of course, this idea of mentorship, but also this idea of sponsorship, thinking about how do we take young people and give them the skills and capacity they need. And I think that another beautiful thing that I greatly admire is all of the stories and experiences that not only you bring to the table, but that you continue to share in this continuing transition and tradition of change and action. And so I think that we as young people could not be more grateful to learn from the action and the legacy that seasoned leaders before us have given us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Actually, I definitely agree with you, Tarina. I feel like, yeah, our seasoned leaders, our elders, they gave so much to be where we are today. I feel like I see among young people a bit of despair about the future sometimes. You know, we have many different challenging realities. There's crippling debt, there's environmental challenges, there's systematic racism, and the poverty, the list goes on. And it's very easy to say, well, because of our elders in the past, that's why we're challenged with these things, and kind of put the blame on our elders. But I think it's also important to be very, very grateful. We can acknowledge the realities, but also see where things have progressed because of those people who, like Dr. Sala, like many others, who stood up and said, no, this can't be like this. We have to make a change, and devoted themselves their whole lives to bringing us to where we are today. And with that comes a lot of wisdom, a lot of, insights, which comes from overcoming adversity. So there's so much to learn. Milhan, did you want to add anything about? Yeah.
Dr. Sala, you mentioned how you love the energy of the youth, but I gotta say, I mean, if I had a fraction of the energy you have right now, I think we could accomplish a lot more. And there's something really important to realize about anyone we work with in the elder generation, and that is they're still here. That means, by definition, they've been doing this for decades and decades. They've seen the rise and fall of society. And so they're not fazed by, and what we're seeing today is in a context of their experience. And I think as young people, we would be foolish to not inherit that of course, wisdom. But for me, the word that comes to mind is loyalty. Loyalty to one cause for that long. My question is simply, why? What has possessed you to want to continue on that path for your entire life? And if I can inherit that, and I want to inherit that from every one of you guys, then, in fact, I had the privilege to basically work with older folks my entire life, at least in my career. And because I'm just so hungry, like you said, to learn. And that is a trait I think many of us younger folks have, is that hunger to learn. And I just want to learn everything there is to know so that I can ensure the future of my kids. I've got my daughter, she's turning 7 this week, and my son is 4. And I want an awesome world for them to grow up in and co-create with us.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. So the question, we got to get a little bit practical as well. Have you experienced or seen an example substantially of good intergenerational cooperation? Or maybe have you seen a challenge for intergenerational cooperation, and maybe how were those challenges overcome? Let's see, what was your experience so far with intergenerational cooperation? And
maybe just to say that the wonderful thing that happened, of course, COVID-19 was so bad, and, the impact on all people. But the wonderful thing that happened at UNICEF, for example, the executive director of UNICEF, when COVID happened, called all the ex-UNICEF people in a meeting and said, you are going to help us. You have the experience. You have the experience of different, diseases that happened before, and you are going to help us here in headquarters with advocacy, but particularly the people, the ex-UNICEF that are living in countries where UNICEF is serving. They can go to our offices and really, give their advice to the younger generations of UNICEF. So for this, we are working in clusters. Like, for example, I'm serving on a cluster on violence against children. What did I learn throughout my career, and how can I help my colleague? Is very important. Like, for example, I want to give you one example that UNICEF did long time ago during wars, and maybe the young generations of UNICEF don't know. During wars, we talked to warring parties. I went to camps of warring parties and told them to stop the war for 2, 3, 4 days, or to stop, the war, yes, so that children and families have access to services. We stopped the war to vaccinate children. We stopped the war to organize back to school campaigns so that children go to school, so that we give them a sense of normalcy. So all these experiences, our executive director, UNICEF executive director, she wants us to share this with our younger generation of UNICEF. I don't still see the result, but we will see the result in the year to come.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, I guess that shared vision is very important for intergenerational.
And not only the vision, but actions that maybe were different and maybe had good result at that time. And why not to try them again? Like what we call days of tranquility. We don't talk about days of tranquility because access to service during war and conflict is very important.
Yes. Thank you so much. Well, how about you, Tarina? I mean, you're leading a policy think tank, and I'm sure you also, even though it's youth run, you have to work as well with the older generation. How has that collaboration, and what are some lessons to learn?
Absolutely. I think with both the Greater Good Initiative and the other organization I was discussing, intergenerational collaboration is such a massive part about what we do, right? Because we think about writing tangible policies, the actual policy briefs from beginning to end, but we can't do that without the guidance, without the advice, without the mentorship of the people that came before us. So we constantly are in constant contact with all of our mentors who come from many different generations, actually, in thinking about how do we write effective policy and how do we think about things in a way that creates impact. We have advisors and mentors that we constantly go to that are kind of a part of the Greater Good Initiatives network and have helped us get to where we are today. So I think that in that is already an example of intergenerational cooperation. And I also think of examples that are kind of more personal and on a smaller microcosm of, within my own community, in the Sikh community, we have a very strong emphasis on community. And, between generations, there's always divisions like language. I can't speak fluent Punjabi, but I can understand it. But there's still that linguistic barrier. And there's just different barriers of different experiences being born in the US versus immigrating to the US and thinking about how do you forge those together. But as Dr. Salah was talking about during the time of the pandemic, so many things happened for so many different communities, and people all across our community came together in service of each other to be there for each other. There was, many young people making letters and videos for our elderly folks in nursing homes and who couldn't leave their houses, and getting on Zoom calls and talking to them, and then learning their stories of how they came to the country and how they gained wisdom and what their advice to us is. And then we all kind of work together and doing different service to the greater community, whether it was food drives, like giving the donations versus actually making the packages, telling us what the most effective ways to have a food drive would be, and then executing it, and then coming up with those ideas together. So I think that there's so many different nooks of cooperation, and for that cooperation to happen on big national global policy stages, it starts within our own communities and how we reach out to people in the generations before us and the generations after us. It's weird for me to think about even being in Generation Z. Somebody was mentioning, or Gen Z. Somebody was mentioning that there's already a generation after me, and my mind was blown. I was like, wait, we aren't the youngest anymore. But thinking about how do we reach out to the folks after us, and thinking about how do we continuously uplift each other and bring each other up and continue to have these conversations. So I think for me, it really does start on that level of family, of community, of learning each other's stories and traditions and going from there.
Yeah. Milhan, you said that you have been working with the elder generation throughout your career. So share some best practices.
Yeah. And, as kind of what we're hearing from Tarina and Dr. Sala, it's like, it's happening everywhere all the time. We're kind of just partitioning it out right now and, taking a look at it. Because I know some people do struggle with intergenerational cooperation. And I think it starts with just focusing on experiential education, but in order to do that well, you need to be aware of your stereotypes. And I know, Trina, you touched on this, and I mean, like if no one knew your age, I mean, it's like we would think you were just, we're on the same page here, but it's like we have stereotypes, and we have to start with acknowledging that. And then if we can at least see, okay, this is a young person, but they're really capable of so much more. If we can just park that stereotype aside. And one thing I do in my classroom whenever I'm teaching in class, I start off with a one statement, one rule in my classroom, and that is there's no such thing as a dumb question or a dumb response, a dumb answer, because like Tarina, you're talking about that fifth grader that just shot his hand up with confidence and said something that, at first glance might be a common response, but it's like, imagine that though. Like these kids have visions that it's impossible for us to come up with because the nature of their new perspective. So for me, it's, I think, internships. I've done a few internships before in my tenure in working in the government or working in the more religious community. And I swear by internships, because you cannot teach a kid in a classroom what you can teach when you give them responsibility and you see them kind of falter here and there, and you let them fail sometimes, but you're there and you're watching and you're supporting them and equipping them, as Tarina says. It is so important. You can't give someone responsibility without equipping them. And so I think if we can pay a closer attention to those details, I think we can have a whole next generation. What is it called? Generation, what's after Z? I don't even know what that is. But support, we can raise a new generation that can be equipped to make the difference that they need to make. Otherwise, they won't be happy and satisfied.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I definitely agree. The mentorship, the learning from past experiences, what works, what didn't work, and this is why it didn't work. So important. Actually, I'm vice president for Women's Federation, and I'm younger generation, I guess. Sometimes I feel older, but then my boss, actually the president of Women's Fed USA, is the older generation. So we work closely together. And I think we work well together because when I first started, I had lots of ideas. I was looking at like learning about it, like, oh, this could change and that could change. And like, why are you doing it like that? And things like that. My youthful energy and excitement is coming forward. But I said, okay, I have to learn more first. Like, I need to know more about this organization. So I kind of took the time to really listen and hear about the history because I'm coming in, and as 2014, the Women's Fed has been around for at least over 20 years. So there's all this history that I have to learn about before I can make a change. Otherwise, my change or my suggestions will be ineffective. So And then on that foundation, I feel like my boss, Mrs. Selly, I think she's in this webinar right now listening in, but I feel like she could feel more confident to trust me with, with different responsibilities, with more and more responsibilities, even if, sometimes maybe there was a mistake or something didn't come out right, or maybe it was not such a good idea, but because we have that trust, I really listened, and she was able to pour out her heart, like what she did and what has been done before. And then that on that foundation, she could empower me to bring my ideas and feel confident to bring my ideas to the table. So yeah, I feel like, our younger generation, we have to sometimes, take a step back, not bring our ideas just yet, and really listen and inherit. And then on that foundation, our elders can really trust us and give us more and more responsibility, even if there are going to be mistakes along the way. But because there's that trust, it's okay, and we're growing together. So yeah, our next question is, what will it take for the UN to realize its fullest potential? Anyone?
Yeah, most importantly, let me read a quotation from the Secretary General Guterres in 2018 on his report on peace building and sustaining peace. He said, the scale and nature of the challenges of sustaining peace calls for closer strategic and operational partnership among the United Nations, national governments, including international, regional, and sub-regional organizations, civil society organizations, women's groups, and youth organizations. It's very important. How can we make those words a reality? How can the United Nations listen and hear and listen to the youth? For example, in my career, I met many young people in all countries that said, listen to us. We are not only victims, we are agents of change. When can we take youth and civil society, families, even, and women, of course, that they are agents of change for peace, because we know they can inculcate peace in the people. They can inculcate peace. I was in a peace building mission. We can sign all kinds, of peace, negotiation, and then sign. But this cannot, will not succeed if not peace is in the community. That the community feels this peace is very important. So let's listen. Let them listen to the people more. And also let the UN use more prevention of conflict. We did this and we can do it. How can we prevent conflict? How can we not only, as I said before, we stop the war at that time, but really to prevent the war is very important. And the UN has the capacity and has the agency to do it. And to also conflict resolution is very important without the using of arms. We can use it. And here, conflict resolution and peace building, youth and young people can do it. They are there. They are in the villages. They are in the cities. They are in the towns. And they can do it. And they can also try to sustain peace. And also, we have all those tools. We have them. We have, in the last decade, the General Assembly, for example, adopted the 2030 agenda. They adopted Sustainable Development Agenda. They adopted also all our work to also counter, violence, extreme violence. We have them. How can we make them a reality? But we cannot make them a reality unless we entreat our governments. And this is our job, I think, to do it. Young people and older people, let's entreat our government so that they make all these a reality. Let them sign and ratify conventions. But how can those conventions become rules and policies in their country? Is very important. And maybe together we can help. in doing this. And of course, we have to have this, as you said, Milan, innovative approaches. The approaches should be people-centered. We are serving the people and the needs of the people. They should be people-centered, and it's very important. That's what I have to say on this, but we have to work on it. It's very important. And if we don't do it now, it will be late. It will be late. And as always, I say, the time is now. And again, I will say, elevate the people and elevate youth and listen to them. I want to listen to them. Very important.
You know, I thank you so much. I might be a bit biased as an educator myself, but everything you're saying is so important. And I think it starts with our education. You know, even listening is a skill like you have to develop. Are we teaching listening, how to listen to people in our schools? Or do we teach about conflict resolution? Do we know that there is a career path to become a diplomat and to understand the different actors and the power struggles that happen between nations and within nations? I mean, this is the kind of education we need to promote and make attractive to these brilliant minds of today who honestly are looking to make a change, but again, are not equipped with the very time-proven methods of making peace.
And maybe it also, this is very important, but also that young people should also be part of committees and decision-making. This is also very committee. They have to be part even maybe of the Security Council, you know? I don't know what I'm saying, but I should, they should be part of their at least delegation, because there are countries that are in the Security Council. Why can't they have a young person sometimes come and talk in the Security Council? They brought them to General Assembly. They brought them maybe to other committees, but did they bring them to the Security Council? And I think this is very important.
Yes, we need the women and children in the brain of the decision making. I love committees and I love being on them, because that's how you can assure that the decisions that are being made at least consider the things that are not seen on the ground in the families.
All right, Tarina?
Yeah, so I love this conversation so much because I think about it a lot in terms of how do we make this a reality? And I think oftentimes when we think about the relationships with young people, there's a conception and tendency to say, we need to let the young people lead. We need to have and acknowledge the power of young people. But what does that mean in a tangible sense? How do we actually do that? And like you said, Dr. Salah, I think it means having young people in the rooms where decisions are made. I think recently the world has seen the power of young people in mobilizing, right? They've seen how we come out and show our voices, show our bodies, show up when things are at risk, whether it's a climate crisis or movements against violence and human rights abuses. But I think what often young people don't get credit for are the actual tangible ideas and policies and core things that we also know how to do. Yes, we know how to organize. Yes, we know how to protest and demonstrate, but we also know how to get things done in terms of thinking about policy and thinking about stakeholders, because in many conversations, we are the stakeholders. When so many voices are talking about this is what young people need. Well, we are young people and we have an idea of what we need because we are facing and experiencing the world in a way that nobody ever has before, no other generation has before. So I think that one is really important, having us in the rooms where decisions are made, having us in committees, and having us in roles that are not simply performative, that are not simply there to just say like, this is the experience of a young person, but also very meaningfully taking into account the opinions, thoughts, ideas of young people. I don't think we'll ever, or at least not soon, reach a point where we have young people voting on the Security Council, although I wish that was a thing. But, you know, in the interim, if we can make that happen, that would be the UN dream. But in thinking about the progress towards that, it's important to have us in rooms and listening to us in a way that's not just having a young person delivering a statement to prove some point, but actually listening to young people and all they have to bring and all their complexity, because we as young people are also not monoliths. We don't all believe the same things. We don't all come to issues from the same perspectives. And that's also beautiful. That's also something that you get the richness of the dialogue, you get the complexity and the different lived experiences that lead us all to that same place. So one, in terms of those high places of power where decisions are being made, but also in communities and countries across the world, starting here in the US and going international, but investing in young people from a young age. So yes, in schools, teaching not only how to handle conflict, but also action, thinking about civic action, thinking about what does it mean to be somebody that speaks out in your community, somebody that activates in your community, somebody that leads in your community. So that starts in schools and the cultures of our communities. I think that in different cultures, we also have different conceptions of young people of, you know, what you need to do in terms of, okay, you sit down and learn, but also thinking about how do we shift those so it's also learning from each other in a mutual sense and thinking about we have so much to learn, but there's also so much that we have to offer as well.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Thank you so much. So actually now I was going to pull a few questions that we got from the audience. The first one is from Bonnie Berry. She says, what can we do to increase, we were kind of talking about this, but any other ideas? What can we do to increase empowerment of youth on the stage of the UN to ensure that the most pressing issues of the times are addressed substantially to benefit all children and young adults, whether it is issues of climate change, peace, access to education, etc.? Yeah, I was thinking when Tarina was speaking that I feel like, young people, we have so much energy and spirit, and, you know, even younger generation than me, I feel like they have so much more courage than I do to speak out and say something. And I feel like some of the frustrations that we feel is when we feel like we give and we want to contribute, and then we don't see it going anywhere. So I feel like we need to have ways in which that we're not just contributing, but we can see the impact. We're doing some substantial, making substantial changes. We're not just giving our opinion, but we can see that our opinion is making a difference and making a substantial difference in, you know, the UN or in communities or elsewhere. I don't know if anyone else had something to add to that question. Go ahead, Milhan.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to seeing everyone as people, you know, whatever your age is. I mean, you look at the strengths that, you know, young people have, and that is, you know, not just the energy, but I think there's we are natural bridge makers, because, you know, as people get older, they tend to be in a certain culture and they don't like to change so much, but young people love to change. And so it's a little easier for us to, you know, lead an initiative of unity, of, you know, bringing different groups of people together. And so I think if we can get responsibility in these kind of areas, then where it's appropriate for a young person to lead and make decisions, and just identifying what those are, and just bringing on the best people for the job is what I always say.
Dr. Sala?
To add to this also, I think, for example, in all our agencies, the personnel, the people that are working are younger people, you know, so it's very important. They are doing the job in the field. They are working in the field. But also it's so important in our agencies, like now we have advisor for children and all this, because children became very important. It's very important. But also we don't have advisors on youth. So I think in every agency, we have to have even a youth section. I know that UNICEF has now, but not many agencies have. So all agencies maybe have an advisor on youth, a youth, you know, they come and they work sometimes in the summer and all this, and then they go out. But how can we make this more sustainable? Is having a presence every day in every UN agency.
I think that that is such a beautiful point. And I also think about, it reminds me of, this is kind of domestic facing, but there's a massive coalition that I'm a part of along with other young people in the US called the Youth and Gov Coalition, where we have been trying to work with the Biden administration to actually implement having young people's voices represented in government in different agencies, from the State Department to the Department of Agriculture to everything in between, and having actual positions outlined for young people. So I think that that is a really huge element of it. And I think that specifically for young people, I think of young women, mentorship is really important in communities, and thinking about how do we share knowledge, intergenerational knowledge? How do we lift each other up when there have been different layers, intersections of marginalization that we might have faced? So I think that that is another element. So thinking about the UN and government institutions themselves, it's this action of having, and I think you also see in different youth councils, whether it be in city or state governments, or on a greater sense, that, you know, you'll have young people come with vastly thought out solutions and really detailed briefings and presentations, like you were talking about before, Katerina. There's sometimes this sense that you're like doing all of this labor and work and see nothing come out of it. So it felt very much like, oh, we have a youth council, here you go, but nothing comes out of it. So thinking about how do we put those institutions and structures in place to make sure that this labor and these genuinely good and thoughtful ideas that have come out of mentorship from generations before us are seen in a way that feels real and authentic, and not just like a position there to have a young person there, but a position there to actually be a mouthpiece, an actor and mover and shaker in advocacy of what young people face in the world today.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. We have time for maybe one more question. This one comes from Andrea Higashibaba. How to increase the humanitarian influence of the UN and decrease the politicization. As an addendum, she mentions that the founder of Women's Federation, Dr. Hak Ja Han Moon, has said that culture and heart move the world and bring about change, not necessarily politics. So how can we kind of decrease some of the politicization that we see at the UN? Any, maybe Dr. Sala knows best, and due to your experience.
My experience, I think the humanitarian part of the United Nations is working very well. I mean, just to see 3 days ago on television, the deputy executive director of UNICEF in Afghanistan talking to a Taliban and telling him that all children and women and people have to have access to services is something. So I think humanitarian agencies are bold and they are everywhere. We are there before, as we say, and after conflict also. It's so important. The work, I don't think many people know the work of the humanitarian agencies, because sometimes the political work takes the upper hand. But the agencies like UNICEF, like World Food Program, like even UNDP, like UNESCO, and all other agencies. You know, for example, during the wars or on conflict, for example, the access to services, the access to education, the access to food is very important. And this is done despite even the conflict that are still there. But most importantly, how do we build up after conflict is also very important. And maybe this we have to reinforce.
All right, thank you. Anything else, Milhan or Tarina, answering the question, or any final thoughts before we wrap up our Q&A?
I'll have a quick just response to that. I mean, you know, I think we have to, I don't want to say mature, but I just want to say, like, politics is a real thing. You know, we do, like you said, it's very complex. For me, politics is simply, it's trying to untangle a very complex communication problem, you know, or a challenge, I should say, when you have so many different peoples that are representing who knows what. And how do you speak to a broad audience with all the different types of opinions? And so I really feel for our leaders today. And I think that, you know, as a young person with more energy, that I should do my part and help understand exactly what's being worked on and the progress being made. And to catch up, you know, Tarina, I know for me, you're kind of an outlier because in everyone you work with, because for me, youth has always been like an asterisk next to my name. Oh, he's a youth person. So then, it's forgivable, don't worry about don't take him too seriously. But I don't know, but Tarina, you're the first person that got me to say, you know what, youth is a power. It does have power too. And I'm learning to use that more. But anyway, that's just my 2 cents on that.
I can't tell you how much that means to me because Mohan, I've learned so much from you, and your guidance and mentorship has been just something that is truly priceless to me and has been a huge part of my life. And I think to that question of politics, it's something that I think about a lot because as somebody who considers myself a radical empath, I think a lot about how these intersections between morality and ethics and power come into play, where people's lives are put on the table as negotiating chips. And I think that that's something that's kind of scary to me in thinking about how do you go about doing this work when lives are in the balance and you have to make trades and deals and negotiations. And I think one thing to think about is, the word politics comes from power when you look at its Latin and Greek roots. And I think the way that the UN is structured, the Security Council, the veto power, the 5 countries, I think that is something that needs to be very critically looked at. And those are institutions that have been quite cemented and quite ingrained. So it would take a lot of work to change. But I think that it is obvious that different countries, especially those in the West, have much greater degrees of power than other countries that come to the table when thinking about the political aspect of it, and even thinking about who gets to dictate what happens in a humanitarian regard in one way or the other. So I think that looking to think about that and how we create pathways to dismantle and change the way that those power dynamics play is a big part of focusing on the humanity versus the politics, and thinking about who has the power and who's controlling the politics, and how do we make sure that this unevenness of power is something that we can look at trying to resolve in any way that we can.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you so much. I'm thinking back to a word you said in your keynote. Political empathy. So that would be wonderful to get that more infused in everything that we do. It's not just politics, it's politics with empathy and caring and responsibility and everything. So at this point, I know we could talk endlessly about all these topics, and it's been so wonderful to hear from each and every one of you, and I know there's so many positive comments.
Maybe a last sentence.
Yeah, go ahead.
A last sentence.
Sure.
The last sentence is that all of us, youth, young people, elders, and all of us here today, is that we know that we have to unite our strength. We have to work together. And I want to reinforce that we all have a sense of responsibility. If not, we will not achieve the goals and the values of the United Nations. And more than that, we have to work together to empower every woman, every man, every young people, every boy and every girl, so that we restore their dignity. It is so important to restore the dignity of every human being, and the United Nations can do it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Wow. Well, that was a very powerful note to end this amazing discussion. So thank you for all of our panelists. Let's give them another very warm round of applause for their contributions. I also want to thank our audience members for giving such reflective questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them. I feel like I need to go back and listen to this recording again and again. There were so many amazing nuggets of wisdom. So to officially close our program, I'd like to invite up Ms. Murli Barlan, the Deputy Director of the WFWPI Offices for UN Relations, to give closing remarks. Ms. Barlan also serves as the Chief Administrative Officer and International Vice President for WFWP International. She is a peace advocate with a special focus on women, youth, family, and community development. Ms. Barlan has played an active role in the United Nations NGO community for the past 24 years and is the author of the following programs: Mother's Heart Network, 10,000 Heroes League, Service for Philippines, Culture of Heart Encounter, HTM Development Framework, Creating Heavenly Communities, Women's World and Permaculture Peace Gardens, so many more. Let us welcome up Ms. Merle Barlan.
Thank you, Katarina. Wow, my heart is full and empowered all over again. Distinguished speakers, guests, and colleagues, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. What a perfect platform to celebrate and remember the UN that we dream of. Thank you so much to our brilliant panel of speakers for honoring us by sharing your inspiring words, the works that you do. What the world needs today is to stay hopeful and positive, and most importantly, leadership by example. Thank you so much, Dr. Sala. Thank you, Tarina, and thank you, Milhan. WFWPI envisions a world of peace and prosperity where women lead with the feminine leadership paradigm, invoking the feminine maternal instincts of love, virtue, nurturance, well-being, cooperation, and education, ensuring all life-sustaining needs are met for the sake of the world as one human family. Thinking back to the original founding principles of the UN, hearing best practices of intergenerational cooperation, and having dialogue between the elder and younger generation today, we see an encouraging and hopeful future and a renewed belief in the UN dream. It is encouraging to hear from Ambassador Manalo that the Philippines fully, I quote, fully supports relevant Security Council resolutions, which aims to actively engage young people to participate meaningfully in the peace processes and conflict resolution. The government's commitment to include the youth in peace-building processes demonstrated through the crafting of the National Action Plan for Youth, Peace, and Security and the establishment of youth peace tables, unquote. This is really crucial in inheriting the UN dream. Dr. Sala's wisdom and confidence, I quote from her speech, that in the last 7 years, the international community witnessed a number of triumphs, among them the adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the sustaining peace resolutions, the resolution on youth, peace, and security, complementing the resolution 1325 of women, peace, and security, and the launch of the Plan of Action to Prevent Violent Extremism. This is an era of partnership with all members of society, including women, youth, in the peace, in the service of peace. The resolution on youth, peace, and security reinforces the transformative power of more than 1.8 billion young people, unquote. Thank you, Dr. Sala. This really powers and inspires me. It further urges the international community and governments to support the youth efforts and integrate them into decision-making at all levels. Tarina's boundless enthusiasm and determination in inheriting and continuing the founding purpose of the UN ideals of the United Nations, representing the young people of the world, highlighting an empathic leadership paradigm, provide us an oasis of hope and positivity during these difficult times. This meeting today brings in additional factor, a critical one of intergenerational trust and partnership. It is truly inspiring when we see the youth contributing their talents and innovations for the betterment of humanity. We can stimulate one another to lead with a power that encourages service, strength, unity, and love. When we see the younger generation inheriting the UN dream with their unbridled determination, we begin to see the light at the end of the tunnel for the pressing global problems we face today. We heard from our dialogue today the importance of integrating the planetary blueprint of sustainability into the fundamental governing principles in national policies, investing in environmental literacy and stewardship programs. in partnership with the government and the civil society sector in order to achieve the SDG by 2030. So on behalf of our international president, Dr. Julia Moon, and our partner representing the International Association of Youth and Students for Peace, and our gratitude also to His Excellency Ambassador Enrique Manalo, the permanent mission of the Republic of the Philippines to the United Nations, for co-sponsoring this event. We thank you. Thank you, distinguished speakers, for honoring us with your brilliant, your heart, and everything, with all of the sincerity that you have given to us. And it was educational and informative meeting we have today. Last but not the least, thank you to the participants from all over the world for your attention and active participation. Our chat is very active today. We hope that we can meet with you again and carry these conversations further, even collaborate with you through our national chapters or in our advocacy work at the United Nations. In conclusion, I'd like to read an excerpt from the WFWPI statement submitted for the UN's CSW 66. Quote, WFWPI reminds the member states the notion of the global family that was implied in the preamble of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. A family, quote, leaves no one behind, unquote, seeking the universal peace in larger freedom. In this time of global introspection and existential worry, we are all challenged daily in both in our private and public lives. It is to live in solidarity, to take care of one another, and to live for the sake of each other as one extended global family. So in the context of the UN Dream and creating a platform for an intergenerational cooperation on our journey to peace, I'd like to officially close with a quote from our co-founder of WFWPI, Dr. Hak Jahan Moon, whom we fondly call the Mother of Peace. Quote, the years of our youth are the best time to dedicate ourselves to exciting goals that make our heart beat faster. We need to set our goals and know who to partner with to achieve them, unquote. Thank you so much, and God bless us all.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Barlan, for your inspiring remarks and for perfectly summarizing the essence of today's event so beautifully. At this point, we have reached the end of our program, our virtual forum, the UN Dream, Intergenerational Cooperation, and our journey to peace. I know there's so much more to be said, so I hope we will continue the conversations, the intergenerational conversations that we just started today, beyond today's program. So on behalf of Women's Federation for World Peace International and Youth and Students for Peace USA, we extend our gratitude and sincere appreciation to all of our wonderful speakers representing the elder and younger generations today. Thank you for your invaluable ideas and contributions to this event. To everyone who joined us today, thank you for your time and your participation. Although we come from various parts of the world, I know I saw Philippines and Taiwan and Portugal and Netherlands and several states across the US and other places. I saw Cote d'Ivoire in there as well. It's been wonderful to engage with you in meaningful conversations on the same platform. So it's been such a pleasure serving as your moderator today, this morning or evening or afternoon. And we hope to see you again soon. All right.